Morning. Glad to see that the rest of you made it through this week after the time change as well. My brain did not want to work at night when I got home. So how many of you are wrestlers or have been wrestlers? I see a few hands. The only wrestling I remember doing as a kid was apparently once a year, the high school would put on a wrestling clinic. And I remember one of my friends when I was in, grade school, maybe third, fourth grade, talked me into going. And I was a fairly shy kid, so I assumed I was going to be with my friend. And we were of not the same body shape at all. And so I ended up with a bunch of kids I knew nothing of, and so I must have liked it enough because I kept going back, and I remember that. But that's about the only real wrestling I've ever done. So maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't heard these names if you're not a wrestler. Alexander Carlin or Rulon Gardner. I hadn't heard their names either until this week when looking for a compelling story about wrestling. And it seems to be a good one. I'll tell you about it. Alexander Carlin was a Russian Greco wrestler. It was said of him he didn't just dominate the world of Greco-Roman wrestling for 13 years, he terrified the world of Greco-Roman wrestling. Most of his opponents didn't hope to win, but to survive without a life-changing injury. With nicknames such as the Russian Bear, Russian King Kong, Alexander the Great, and the Russian Experiment, he reigned from 1988 to 2000. He won 886 matches and lost one. In his 6 years leading up to the 2000 Sydney Olympics, not 1 point had been scored against him. He had won the past 3 Olympics. In fact, his medal record for all events was 35 gold and 1 silver. He was the chosen winner for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Rulon Gardner was born in Afton, Wyoming. The youngest of 9 children, Rulon grew up on a dairy farm. Struggling in school with learning disabilities and being large for his age, he received nicknames such as Dumbo and Fatso. But despite them, he found success in sport, participating in football, shot put, and wrestling. His wrestling career started at the age of 6 at a wrestling camp at Star Valley, participating every year until he started junior high school at the age of 12. Wrestling through high school and into college where he completed his degree in physical education from the University of Nebraska, at which he set his sight on pursuing wrestling full-time and working towards his goal of the Olympics, winning U.S. champion in 1995 and 97. At the 2000 Sydney Olympics, Alexander and Rulon find themselves pitted against each other, competing in the super heavyweight class of 286 pounds. Watching videos of them, I imagine I would look like a tiny little puny fellow standing next to them. I'm going to read from the Olympics page about the final wrestle. In the first of the 2 3-minute rounds, Carlin attempted his signature move, the reversed lift. To pull off the move successfully, a wrestler needs to lift the entire body of their opponent off the ground before twisting them around in the air and landing them up underneath their own body on the floor. So I don't know how many of you can imagine, but trying to lift up a 289-pound man who doesn't want to be lifted up off the ground, and yet turning them upside down and putting them back in. This was his signature move. This is how he'd win. You'd receive 5 points for that, and for most people, they couldn't come back from that. It was a move most wrestlers had deemed impossible due to the immense strength required to perform it. Carlin wasn't most wrestlers. Over the years, the move he had become a master at performing usually led to one outcome, victory. But if Carlin wasn't your average human being, neither was Gardner, who was extremely physically imposing. His large frame made it impossible for Carlin to lift him from the ground. And by the end of the first round, the score was even, neither scoring a point. In the second round, as the two wrestlers grappled for superiority, Carlin made a huge mistake. While both men had their arms locked around each other, Carlin broke his lock. This seemingly insignificant movement brought into play a recent rule change that meant that the USA's Gardner was awarded a point to a leading 1-0. Incredibly, the Russian Bear found himself losing a bout for the first time in 7 years. The rules of Greco-Roman wrestling are such that if the two-round bouts ends with one person leading only by 1 point, the match goes on into overtime. And so the Sydney 2000 final moved into a nail-biting 3-minute action that would decide the Olympic gold medalists. Carlin once again attempted the reverse lift. Gardner held strong. As the bout moved towards its conclusion, it seemed as if the Russian athlete, once thought as invincible, was tiring in front of the crowd's eyes, perhaps even looking human. Finally, the bell tolled, and Rulon Gardner was pronounced Olympic champion. The underdog had triumphed. David had beaten Goliath, and the world of wrestling would never be quite the same again. It's interesting to watch that fight. It's really short. It's not super action-packed, but you can see that Carlin is trying to do the thing that he needs to do to win and to secure victory. And Gardner, he just kind of holds on. He just doesn't really do anything amazing, but he just fights till the end with what he had. The idea that he was going to pick the other guy up was not even a possibility, I don't think, but he just doggedly kept into the fight. So a few years, I guess it was not a few, a year ago, as we were going through the book of Genesis, the story of Jacob wrestling with God really struck me. And I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I guess today's the day that we get to talk about it. But so if you'll turn to Genesis chapter 25. Obviously, the story of Jacob is long, covers many chapters. I'm only going to have to briefly touch on pieces so that we can lay out the story till it gets to the point where he wrestles with God. Patriarchs and prophets, if you desire to know more in depth about this story, or recently, Story Church, David Astrick did a whole 7-part series over it if you have more interest in the story and want to go more into depth on each piece of the story. But we'll have to hurry through this, I think, to make it to there. Genesis chapter 25, and we'll start in verse 19. This is the genealogy of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as his wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian and of Padanaram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, "If all is well, why am I this way?" So she went and inquired of the Lord. I don't know how many of you in seeking God think if God's dealing with this, why is it going this way? So she as well, she hadn't been pregnant. She seeks the Lord. She becomes pregnant, and yet there's something strange about this pregnancy. What's going on inside of me? And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 person shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Oftentimes when God answers us, it just leads to more questions. And we have to just trust. I mean, if you go down, well, why is there 2 nations inside of me? Why are they going to fight? Why is one going to be better than the other, and why will one serve the other? Sometimes we just have to take the answer he gives. Verse 24, so when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over. So they called his name Esau. Afterwards, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So Esau, red, he's called Edom later, family of the Edomites, and Jacob, supplanter, deceitful, snare setter. I also wanted to draw attention to this parental love. One loved the one, and one loved the other. And we can see how that's going to slowly play out in his life, their lives. Starting in 29 again. Now Jacob took a stew. Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with this red stew, for I am weary. Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. And Esau said, look, I'm about to die. What good is this birthright to me? And then Jacob said, swear to me as this day. And so he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew and lentils. And then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. To me, this doesn't just seem like happenstance, that Jacob just happened to be making some food. It seems as though he, at times, looked for opportunity to set that trap for his brother. He came back from a hunt, maybe without success, is hungry and needs something to eat. He's impatient, as if he can't go find his mother to make him something. And here, his brother lays a snare. I'll give you some of my food, but you got to give me that birthright. As we go through this story, we sometimes get tempted to think in these stories that one's the hero and one's the bad guy. And the story kind of proves that whole thing wrong. Oftentimes somebody seems like the good guy, and then he turns out to be the bad guy. And the bad guy seems to have more scruples than the good guy. Chapter 26, I'm going to read verse 3 through 5. There's a famine in the land, and so they need to figure out what to do, and God gives instruction. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you, and bless you, for you and your descendants, and I will give you this land, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father, and I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give you your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my commandments, and kept my charge and my commandments, my statutes and my laws. God confirms with Isaac the same covenant that he'd given to Abraham. And it seems like the boys should have been along for this their experience. They should have known that God was calling for the same thing. Isaac falls into the same trap of his father when they stay there. He goes to the king Abimelech, verse 10, and Abimelech, and he lies to him just like his father had. I'm trying to hurry through the story so we don't have to read it all, but Abimelech, prior, Abraham had lied to him about who his wife was, Sarah, and he saw them and said, hey, wait, this isn't a sisterly thing we're doing here. And so here he doesn't learn from his father's mistakes. He makes the same mistake and lies to him. So verse 10, Abimelech said, what is this that you have done to us? One of the people might soon have laid with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Verse 12, then Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. I'm going to read verses 26 and 29 of this section. Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahaz, one of his friends, and Pichol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you have hated me and have sent me away from you? But they said, we have certainly seen that the Lord is with you, so we have said, let there be an oath between us. Between you and me, and that you will do no harm, since we have not touched you, and since we have done nothing to you but good, and have sent you on your way in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So they had been fighting in the land about water situations. Abraham had dug wells. They had filled them up. Now here comes Isaac's men. They've been trying to find water, and then every time they did, Abimelech's men would come and say, hey, that's our water. You get out of here. And so even though they were suffering for water, they were still being multiplied, and they saw the evidence of God in this. And so they came and said, you are now the blessed of the Lord. It's funny that this Abimelech, he has more scruples than Isaac when it comes to what's right and wrong, when it comes to lying about women. So moving on to chapter 27. Now it came to pass, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, that he could not see, that he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son. And he said to him, here I am. And then he said, behold, now I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now therefore, please take your weapons and your quiver and your bow and go out into the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may be blessed before I die. So we didn't cover this part of the story, but with disregard to what Rebekah had been told by the angel, that I guess we did to a certain degree, that the older would serve the younger. Abraham's still going forward with this because of his love for Isaac. He's still going forward with trying to bless him. And somehow Rebekah has spies in the camp or something and hears it out. In verse 5. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game and to bring it. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob, her son, saying, indeed, I hear your father speak to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game and make savory food for me, that I may eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, according to what I have commanded you. Go now to the flock and bring me from there 2 choice kids of the goats, and I will make savory food of them for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall take it to your father, that he may eat it, and that he may be blessed before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "Look, Esau, my brother, he is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man, and perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself, not a blessing." But his mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go get them for me." And he went and got them and brought them in to his mother. And his mother made savory food, such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the choice clothes of her elder son Esau, which were in her house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skins on the kids of the goats, and on his hands, on the smooth parts of his neck. And then she gave the savory food of bread which he had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. Once again, this doesn't just seem to be happenstance. She has all this stuff prepared. She has choice clothes of her older son, and she has a plan. Don't worry about this hairy thing. I got some skins ready for this. It's like she had planned ahead of time. And Jacob only gives a small objection. It's like he just kind of goes along with the plan. Well, I'm kind of hairy, and what if I get a blessing? And then or a curse instead of a blessing, and somehow she thinks that she can obfuscate God and take that curse upon herself, which just seems kind of strange. And we get a sense of Jacob and her relationship here. She multiple times just says, "Do what I say, and do what I say." And so Jacob seems to just be kind of acquiescent to what his mom has for her to do. So he went to see his father, verse 18, and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit, and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because the Lord your God brought it to me." Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he said, not recognizing him because of his hands were hairy like his brother's Esau's hands. So he blessed him. Then he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He said, "I am." He said, bring it near to me, and I will eat my son's game, so that my soul may bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine and drink. And his father Isaac said to him, "Come near now, kiss me, my son." And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled his clothes and blessed him and said, "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of the field, which the Lord has blessed. Therefore, my God, give you of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of the grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brother, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you." Here we get the sense that Isaac feels something's wrong. He can't see well, but he can still smell, he can still hear, he can still feel. And though his senses tell him possibly something's up, he moves forward because of his desire to give this blessing to his older son. He repeats the question over and over, or who are you? And he has to lie and say, "I'm Esau." And Who are you? Are you Esau? I am. It's hard here. He's deceiving, with his mother's help, his father. Now, after that, he leaves the room, and here comes his brother Esau. Now it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, that Jacob had scarcely gone out of his presence of Isaac, his father, that Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. He also had made savory food and brought it into his father and said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" So he said, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, Who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me, and that I might eat before you came? And I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed. Then Esau heard the words of his father. He cried with exceedingly great bitter cry, and said, Let my father bless me also, O my father. But he said, Your brother came with deceit, and has taken away your blessing. And Esau said, Is he not really named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Then Isaac answered and said to Esau, Indeed, I have made him your master and all his brethren, and I have given him as servants with grain and wine, and I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said, Behold, your dwellings shall be of the fatness of the earth, and the dew of heaven from above. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother, and you shall come to pass when you become restless, you shall break the yoke from your brother's neck. Certainly, Isaac is now starting to put his uncertainties about the situation before together. And it says he trembled exceedingly. Whether that was because of what had happened, a betrayal, or because he realized that even the thing that he was trying to do did not succeed because of what God had planned. And now Esau is pleading for the thing that he once didn't even care about. It's interesting. Esau despised his birthright. It felt to him as a trap. He had to do certain things. He had to act like his grandfather Abraham. He had to act like his father Isaac. He had certain obligations and duties that would be placed on him, and he didn't want those. But Jacob, on the other hand, didn't get what the birthright was about either. He thought he could take it by manipulation, by hook or crook. Neither of them knew what it really was to have this blessing. So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing his father had blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning of my father are at hand. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. Brings back to the story of, there goes my brain, Cain and Abel, thank you. It rings back to that. He says it in his own heart, but somehow he must have said it enough because his mother gets a word of what's happening. So Jacob needs to flee. Let me see, where was I? Verse 44, I'm trying to pick, I see our time's running. He said, 42, and the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah, so she went and called Jacob, her younger son. And she said to him, "Surely your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him for only a few days until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns from you, and he forgets what you have done to him." It's interesting that she doesn't play any part in this all of a sudden, and that she has a plan. Let's get out of here. It's sad. He never sees his mother again. She's trying to protect him and send him away. And so in some cases, a curse does fall on her. She never actually sees him face to face. She now then goes to Jacob and says, "Hey, I have this plan. We need to send him away. I really don't like how Esau has been marrying the ladies of the land, and we got to send him away. There's something bad's going to happen." And so she tricks Jacob into thinking that he has an idea about sending Isaac away to see her brother, Laban. So Jacob believes. And as he's wandering the desert, you get the idea that he's left with nothing, fleeing his brother. He later says, "I only have a staff when I crossed this river." Chapter 28, verse 10 says, "Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night, because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones from the place and put it under his head, and he lay down in this place to sleep. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set upon the earth, and its top reached into heaven, and there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it." He doesn't even have an extra outer garment to roll up. He didn't leave the house with another hoodie that he could roll up and use as a pillow. He has nothing. In his deceit, in all of this, his brother looking to kill him, he leaves with absolutely nothing. He's alone. We like to see him as this young man, but earlier he's at least 40 years old because his brother had married, and when he married, he was 40. But you get the sense that he's really alone in the desert, in a place his brother would have been fine to be alone in, but yet he was a place of the tent, a place of the pasture, and he's all alone. But in his aloneness, he sees this vision of a ladder coming down from heaven, and angels coming and going on it. And Lord, verse 13, "And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land of which you lie I will give you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And you and your seed and all your families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you." So here he says to Jacob, "I am the God of Isaac. I am the God of Abraham." The sense is that he's not really Jacob's God yet. When he was talking to his father earlier, "How did you get this food so quickly? Your God has given it to me." He had to invoke the call of his father's God. And that in itself seems fairly, when you're deceiving somebody and yet you have to use God as your proof. You can feel like the burdens of all these things that he's done are upon him. And yet God has come to him and said, "I will give you that Abrahamic blessing. I will go with you and I will bring you back here, and I will not leave you until I have done so." So that next morning, Jacob takes the stone that he had used as a pillow and sets it up as a pillar. I don't know what things you have done or when you feel really low, but somehow God can take those things when you find yourself alone and empty, like you've made major mistakes, and he can turn those low spots where you're sleeping on a rock, and he can change them into pillars where you can say, God did this for me. He took me from where I was, and he's at that point set me forward with promises to do something different. God can make pillars out of our problems. So Jacob continues on to find his uncle Laban. But before he goes, after this experience with God, he says, if you will do all these things you've said, you shall be my God, and I will give you 1/10 of everything that you have given me. So he goes on to go find Laban. And we'll have to paraphrase the next section, chapter 29. Jacob shows up there at the well. He sees the herds gathering, and there's a big stone over the well. And to him, this seems odd. Why are you coming here, wasting all this time? The sheep should be eating. Yes, they might need water, but why aren't you rolling the stone away? And the shepherds of the place say, well, we have to wait till everybody shows up. This rock's too big. We can't move it. And so as he's doing this conversation, he asks about Laban and asks, yeah, we know who he is. He's part of this area. And then Jacob asks, is he doing well? Yes, he's fine. In fact, here comes his daughter, Rachel, coming with her sheep. And you wonder if this goes back to the stories he's heard from his mother, where she at the well getting water, and Abraham's servant shows up with camels laden with treasures and gives her a ring in her nose and rings in her ears, on her fingers, and sends her. She's so excited and runs home to tell about this man that has come to find them. And you wonder if he, in seeing Rachel, has kind of this little twinge of a similar story. So he goes to her and explains who he is. And it's odd. He breaks down so much that he cries on her shoulder. Because to a sense you get that the loneliness is over. I finally have made it. It's a comforting place for him to be among the sheep and soon among the tents. So she runs home, tells her father Laban about Jacob being there. And Laban comes running to find him. Verse 13 of 29. Then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. You wonder if Laban had remembered the story as well and had come to see about all these miraculous gifts that were possibly coming with Jacob. And he was sorely disappointed when he finds only a wayward young man. So after that month, verse 15, then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? It doesn't seem as though this is just a normal, hey, you want to work for me kind of a thing. Laban's trying to find a way to, after that month of, as you read the story, after that month of seeing what Jacob is able to do with the flocks, he's like, how do I manipulate this situation? How do I gain from here? And so he comes and says, you serve me for nothing. And Jacob's like, I didn't say I'd do this for nothing. And so what shall your wages be? moving on in verse 16. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Just the naming of the girls, something I learned while reading and watching stuff about this story. Leah kind of has the reference to the name cow, and Rachel to the young sheep, a young ewe. So even in the naming of these, he sees them as money to a certain degree. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your youngest daughter. And Laban says, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man, as if there was more choices. And I imagine he jumped at the 7 years thing. That's a lot of money in all reality. He probably didn't even, there was no rebuttal. There was like, oh, well, that's not quite enough. I think he just fine, we're going to do this thing, 7 years. I'm going to get rich off this guy. And we know the story. He serves him 7 years as though it was days, just a week. And we see what that love must have been like for Rachel, that it was just but a matter of time. So Laban prepares the feast. This marriage feast. They participate in this weekly festival. Jacob comes and says, prior to this, comes to him and says, the time is now. I want to be with my wife. And so that's how the wedding begins. And so we know that as the party went on, Jacob goes off to his chambers, wherever he was, and Laban is to bring Rachel to him. But the deceiver falls into the trap of the greater deceiver. And you wonder, as deceitful as Laban is, maybe Rachel had a bit of that cunning as not. Yeah, his mother had Rebecca, had learned some of that cunning as well. When you see how cunning Laban is. So Laban doesn't do what he says. He gives his older daughter Leah in the morning. It just says, in the morning it was Leah. And you can't imagine the astonishment, the surprise, the heartache that comes. And Jacob is just gobsmacked, doesn't know what to do. Verse 25 says, so it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? And I wonder at that point if any of what he had done comes back to him. And Laban says, it must not be done so that in our country to give the youngest before the firstborn. He's like, Jacob must have been like, well, why didn't you tell me that before? You can see that there's some real deceit been played out here. Laban had a plan, and he successfully pulled it off. So they make a deal that he would continue to serve him, that he would follow out the rest of this marriage week, that the disgrace wouldn't be brought on the family. Then he gives him Rachel as designed, and he then serves him 7 more years. So 14 years he is with Laban. We'll skip the section on the childbearing between these 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. But if I have anything to say about it, no wonder there's such dysfunction when it comes to the story of Joseph. Why the brothers hate each other so badly. When you see the contention between the wives of trying to make children and the names they give them because of it, and even in that childbearing, there's a section where there's mandrakes brought to the field, which at the time were known for being a fertility and kind of this aphrodisiac, and they make bargain over Jacob with these. It's a messed up thing. And I'll say more about that. We read these stories and we want to hold these people up, but we see that they're so messed up, and really they're not too much different than we are. So after serving Laban, Jacob decides that it's time to go. It's time to go back home. Chapter 30, verse 25. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go and go to my own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children, from whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you." Then Laban said to him, "Please stay. I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience," my Bible says, some say divination, "that the Lord has blessed me for your sake." Then he said, "Name your wages, and I will give it." So we're back to this whole wages thing that we saw before. As though he recognizes the blessing of God, even though he was mistreated, and that God still was blessing Jacob. And he knows if he loses them, things are going to not go as well for him. Jacob says in verse 31, he said, "What shall I give you, Laban?" And Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything." He knows that this is just one of these other traps. If you give me something, you're going to keep me here longer. And so Jacob makes this deal with him. He says, "I will take all the spotted, striped, dark-colored lambs, goats out of your flocks. They're the fewer, they're the more, maybe less desirable. I will take those, they will be mine, and I will serve you for them." And there's a whole way of him doing that, with whittling sticks and putting in front of the ones that are of more better breeding stock. And he somehow, through that, whether it was God's blessing, which it appears it was, or even maybe had something to do with just his knowledge of husbandry of animals. And so God blesses him, and through this, and he ends up with plenty of stuff, of animals, and so he needs more servants, therefore his house keeps growing. I'm going to continue on in chapter 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, "Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has acquired all of our wealth." And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land your father and to your family, and I will be with you." So now not only is Jacob desiring to go home, God has given him this permission to go home and that he would be with him. So Jacob sends for Rachel and Leah into the field to the flocks. So it's like he needs to get away from all the surrounding people so that they can have a conversation about what's going to happen. And he said to them, "I see your father's countenance, that is, it's not favorable toward me as before. But God, my father, has been with me, and you know that with all might I have served your father. Yet the father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he thus said, the streaked should be your wages, then the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. And it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted up my eyes and saw a dream, and behold, the rams which which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray-spotted. Then the angel of the Lord spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob, I have set Jacob. And he said, I am here. And he said, lift your eyes now and see. All the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray-spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you, and I am the God of Bethel. I don't know what things you're going through, whether you, like Jacob, have been in situations that have been deceitful and you've been hurt by them. People who should be loving you, not loving you. Maybe even you find yourselves by your own choices in a place, but God sees all of it, and he's been watching and he takes care. He reminds him he is the God of Bethel, back where he had been laying on that rock, and he had made the pillar and anointed it. So at this point, you can tell that even Rachel and Leah are tired of the situation. Verse 14, then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there still any portion of our inheritance for us and our father's houses? See, they were supposed to get a portion of that dowry that Jacob should have brought, but since he didn't bring a dowry, he served them 7 years. So they should have got some of that money that Jacob made in those 14 years at that. Aren't we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from the Father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, let's do it. So they flee from there that day. They gather all their stuff, take off. Laban had gone to do some shearing. And he comes back to find them all gone. We'll skip the part of the story where the gods have been stolen, and which just is a comment on Laban's gods that can be stolen and put in a basket and sat on top of aren't gods at all. So just a comment on that. So by this point, after the accusation of the gods being stolen and Laban's angry because they'd left in such a hurry, and he starts making excuses. Well, I wanted to have a party for you. I wanted to see my children before they went. And Jacob's like, no, if you had done that, we would still be there. And he's at this point, he's just done with Laban, and he kind of cuts to the chase. In verse 36 of 31, he says, then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. What is my trespass? What is my sin that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of my household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that you may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you, I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, their goats, their young, and I have not eaten the rams of the flock. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you, I bore the loss of it. So he's saying all the things, even when something was lost in your flock, I didn't charge it to you, I gave you one of mine back. That I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by the day or stolen by night. There I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and for the frost by night, I was sleep deprived from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. You have changed my wages 10 times, unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the father of Isaac had not been with me. Surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night. Laban had had a dream about not coming and saying anything good or bad to Jacob. Basically, God said to him, leave him alone. You've had enough. So even Jacob now is beginning to recognize God's favor upon him. So they make a covenant between the two that they would not come past this stack of rocks they made, that they would not come to hurt each other. And Jacob continues on his way home. As they're traveling, chapter 32, verse 1 says, so Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. And he called the name of the place Mahanaim. It's basically two camps. So as many of people and flocks and such that he had with him, he sees an army of angels the same size coming along. I mean, Jacob is seeing miraculous care from God here. And so he's coming back to his brother. The memories of what he's done are coming, and he needs to decide how I'm going to appease my brother. How am I going to make Esau happy with me? I have no idea is he still holding a grudge? Is he still looking to kill me? And so he sends ahead of him mass amounts of stuff. And earlier he had said that he would give a tenth of all he had. And to me, he doesn't have a temple in which to bring this. And here it seems as though he's sending ahead of him to his brother Esau that tenth of what God had given him. And it describes how many of each kind of animal he sent. And it seems fairly precise. So you wonder if this is what he's sending ahead to his brother. I'm going to give this tenth back because you are bringing me back. And he instructs his servants, when you find him, tell him, it's your servant Jacob, it's your verse 3 of 32. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir and the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, speak thus to my lord Esau, thus your servant Jacob, I have dwelt in the land of Laban and stayed there until now, and I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. But then his servants return, and they don't have good report. They say he's coming, and he's coming with 400 men. So everything that he had done doesn't to have seemed to appease his brother. On one hand, he seems to have God's favor. He's got this army of angels that he saw with him, and yet he's still concerned about what's going to happen with his brother. So he breaks his camp in two. He decides if one camp gets attacked, at least maybe the other one will survive. And he goes to beseech the Lord, verse 9. Then Jacob said, O God, my father Abraham, O my God, of my father Abraham, and the God of my father Isaac. And the Lord said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of the mercies I'm not worthy of the least of the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I have crossed over the Jordan with my staff, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother and from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother of my children, for you, mother and the children, and said, I will surely treat you well, and make you descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Jacob's prayer here is a example prayer to go to God, pleading for forgiveness for what you've done, for raising up what he's done for you, and reminding him of the promises that he has given you, bolstering your own confidence in God because he's faithful to the promises he's made. So he separates his family, he sends them away across the river, and he's there by himself. And it's a call back to that point where he had left his family's home, and he's in the desert, and he's all alone again. He's afraid of what his brother's going to do. He sees the promises of God, and yet he still hasn't called him his God. You see that he's on the verge of doing so. He's been prodded and poked, but he still hasn't done it. Chapter 32, verses 22. And he arose that night and took his 2 sons, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford at Jabbok. He took them and sent them over to the brook and sent over what he had. And Jacob was alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said to Jacob, Jacob. And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. And Jacob called that place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life was preserved. I don't know how many of you have ever dislocated anything. I've dislocated my left shoulder 3 times. And at no point did I want the person who was driving me to the hospital to pull over and have a wrestling match. I don't know if anybody here has ever dislocated their hip. I imagine the pain is far more superior to your shoulder. I mean, the shoulder socket is kind of this floppy thing anyway. The only thing that's close is when I was in like 5th or 6th grade, my pelvis had grown faster than the top of my femur. And so if I would run too hard, or if I'd stop to kick a ball and put all my weight on that leg, it would briefly pop in and out. And the first time it ever happened, I fell on the ground. It hurt. So I can't imagine in the sense as he's wrestling there, because at first he must have thought of his brother. Esau's here. He's here to take my life. And he's wrestling with all he has. And when he can't prevail against this thing that's wrestling him, the thing just touches his hip and it pops out. And yet he still clings, he still struggles, and he realizes this isn't just Esau, this is something greater. This is that thing I've been wrestling with all along. This is that God that I've been wrestling with. And he doesn't want to let go. He wants that blessing. He realizes what it means now. He realizes the significance of it. It's not just I get some stuff. It's bigger than that. This is the God that wants to transform the world through us. And so he changes his name from liar, from deceit, from cheat, from snare setter to Israel. One who wrestles with God, one who sits next to God, one who prevails with God. I don't know what choices you've made in your life. Maybe you've been an Esau. In fact, we probably all have. We've all manipulated situations to get our way. We've all said things that weren't true to get our way. We've all done things that were Esau. God wants to change our names. In fact, in Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, I believe, he says he will give us a stone, a white stone, with a name that only he knows, a new name. I look forward to that day when I can see that name that Jesus has prepared for me. But even now, if you don't see him face to face, as Jacob did, you can still have a new name. He wants to give you the name of Israel. There seems to be 2 things that can happen here in life. You can choose to continue to wrestle with God, or you can walk away. I don't know I think it's far better to wrestle with God than to not wrestle at all. Sometimes it feels easier maybe to walk away. We see stories of people in the Bible who walked away. Cain, for example, seems to have walked away. He didn't want to wrestle with God. And God doesn't come to wrestle with you to hurt you, but to transform you, to change you, to make you better. Jacob, from this moment, sees his brother. They kiss, they hug. It's like a great family reunion. In fact, you see that something must have happened with Esau while he was gone, because Esau doesn't want to destroy him anymore. In fact, he wants him to live with him. And Jacob still, whatever reason, doesn't really say, is hesitant about the whole thing. But as Jacob continues on, he goes and he buys a piece of property. Chapter 33:18 says, "Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. And there he bought a piece of property, and he pitched his tents." And verse 20 says, "Then he erected there an altar there, and he called it Elohim Israel," or God, the God of Israel. So here he's prepared to call. Now it's not just the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, but it's also the God of Jacob, Israel. Rulon Gardner beat out the 1996 Olympic silver medal winner, Matt Garafi, to be on the Olympic team. People said Rulon was good, but not Olympic good. Feeling good about making the team and excited about the possibilities, he went to Russia 1 month before the Olympic Games for a tournament. And it sounds like among the wrestling people, if you want to be tested, you go to Russia. In the finals, he was pinned in 13 seconds. It was devastating. In an interview, Rulon said, "It was the best thing that could have happened to me." His pride was laid in the dust. He went into the Olympics not expecting to win first place, but to do the best he could for his country. Later, Rulon went on to face a snowmobile accident where he was riding, he got separated from his group, and he was riding over a frozen river and fell in. Snowmobile got caught between two rocks. He managed to get to shore, and he survived in the snow and cold for 18 hours and was rescued. Later, he was in an airplane crash, and Lake Powell, possibly, I can't remember, it was in Utah. They had to swim over a mile to get to shore. Once again, they had to spend the night in the cold. He said, in talking about these things, he said it was all the training and intense struggles in the matches that made him able to survive. Wrestling with God is the things that allow us to survive later when we want to let go. So earlier I talked about, closing here, I talked about the faults of these people. Patriarchs and Prophets says, inspiration faithfully records the faults of good men, those who were distinguished by the favor of God. Indeed, their faults are more fully represented than their virtues. Men whom God favored, to whom he entrusted great responsibilities, were sometimes overcome by temptations and committed sin, even as we at the present day strive, waver, and frequently fall into error. Their lives, with all their faults and follies, are open before us, both for our encouragement and warning. If they have been represented as without fault, we in our sinful nature might despair at our own mistakes and failures. But seeing where others struggle through their discouragements, like our own, where they fell upon the temptations as we have done, and yet took heart again and conquered through the grace of God, we are encouraged in our own striving after righteousness as they, though sometimes beaten back, recovered their ground and were blessed by God, so we too may be overcomers in the strength of Jesus. Oops, just one more. And this from Special Testimonies. What is justification by faith? It is the work of God in laying the glory of man in the dust and doing for man that which is not in his power to do for himself. When men see their own nothingness, they are prepared to be clothed with the righteousness of Christ. And Claire was having to memorize her treasure verse this week, and it comes from James 1, 3-5. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. If you need wisdom, ask your gracious God. He will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for your asking. The God we serve is willing to get dusty with us. He's willing to wrestle with us. My invitation is you to never give up wrestling with God. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as we looked at the life of Jacob, the troubles he placed for himself, the questions of what would have been if he hadn't done those things, how would you have fulfilled your promises, Lord? We don't always have answers, but we do know that you're faithful, that even though we mess things up, you can bring good out of them. When we struggle with you, we can come away from those things and be better for them. That you can take our injuries that may occur when at our own hand, and you can make them pillars to you. Lord, we just ask that you will help us to recognize your love, your care, your watch over each and every one of us, and that you have made each and every one of us the same promise that you have made Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that you will change us, that you will make us more like you, that you have prepared a new name for us, and that we can put the things of the past behind us, and we can look to the things that you have promised us and live for them. And may that we find joy in serving you, just as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.